Welcome back to Life's Challenge. My name is Avital, and today we have a very special guest with us, Rabbi Yair Melchior, who is the Chief Rabbi of Denmark. And today we're going to be talking about Copenhagen and the Denmark Jewish community. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sure, I'm happy to be here.
So I'm curious, you have a title that is distinct from the other rabbis I've spoken to, and that is Chief Rabbi. So I think a lot of people might be unfamiliar with that. What does it mean to be a Chief Rabbi?
Chief Rabbi, you have it's more a historical position. There were countries who asked the Jews to have a Chief Rabbi. And they said, there are so many, as you know, so many rabbis, so many communities, we can't deal with that as a country. We need someone that is the one we go to if there are any Jewish questions or something that we need. So that's historically. It was actually an obligation that the Jewish community in Denmark took upon himself in 1814 when Jews got equal rights in Denmark, that the community had to bring a chief rabbi that will be the one to represent the Jews in Denmark. The word chief rabbi could be used historically also in some local communities. People said he's a chief rabbi here. It doesn't mean a lot, especially, for example, today in Denmark, I'm the chief rabbi, but there's no rabbi under me. So there's no regular rabbi too. So it's not, and it's not necessarily that the chief rabbi is also the most important rabbi. In many places, because the chief rabbi can be a more political, we see that in Israel too, that it's a political rabbi. So the chief rabbi is not the most important rabbi in Israel. There's no doubt in that. So the same you can say in many other places. Here, it's the same thing because there's only one rabbi.
And I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you come from a long generations of chief rabbis as well. Is that true?
Yeah. My father is still the chief rabbi of Norway, and my grandfather was the chief rabbi of Denmark. My great grandfather was the chief rabbi of Denmark. My great grandfather was the chief rabbi of Denmark. So we had this position. It wasn't necessarily father to son. My great grandfather is from my great grandmother's father, so not direct line. But we had rabbis in Denmark. We had rabbis. We talk about 7 generations of rabbis.
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing.
And I came back. I didn't grow up here in Denmark. I grew up in Israel.
Tell me about that. Tell me about where you grew up and how you came to be in the position you hold today.
I was born in Norway, in Oslo, when my father was the rabbi in Norway. And so I was born there in 82. We made Aliyah in 86. I grew up in Jerusalem, and as we know, there's a big difference between diaspora Jewry and Israeli Jewry. Very connected, but also very different. I remember my parents told me that when we went back to Israel, I was not 4 years old yet. So, but my older brothers, that one of them said, there's a weird difference between Israel and Norway. Because in Norway, when we went to the synagogue, we did something Jewish. And here, when we go to the synagogue, we do something religious. And that is a very... so my older brother was 10 years when he made this remark. But it's very true. And there's something different in diaspora Jewry. So I grew up in Israeli society, especially in Jerusalem, in the area that is more like liberal Orthodox area of southern Jerusalem. People know these areas of Katamon, Baka, Talpiot, these neighborhoods that are connected to a very specific kind. We were very... my father chose not to go with a kippah sruga, not with a, how do you call it?
Knitted?
But he had like a regular, yeah, not knitted. He had a regular, like a black kippah, and people couldn't place him. They called him a chared, they called him dati, they called, but also because of it, he was very active politically. My father, and I think that in many ways that I felt the same. Like that we didn't belong to any of the group, and also didn't like the belonging of groups, and one of the things that changed for me was when I came to the age of the Mechina, pre-army program, like a gap year program before the army. And before it was very popular. Today it's very popular in Israel. You have thousands every year to go to the Mechinot, but when I was, it was still right in the beginning. And I went to the first Mechina that wasn't a religious Mechina, but a Mechina for religious and secular together. It was the only one. And it was very different in the world at the time, and this is the place that I was most connected to. So I went there into the Mechina, also during my army service, and also afterwards, after the army, and I got married, and I have 3 children, and we lived there in this very unique kibbutz in southern Jerusalem in Gilo. It's called Bet Israel, and this was like my place to be, living in a community that is not that is Jewish and not only religious. So this is part of it. I studied in the different yeshivot with many different rabbis, some of the greatest rabbis of our time, from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein and Rav Yehuda Mital. I had a very unique opportunity to study with Rav Shagar, Shimshon Gerson Rosenberg, who was a very, very unique thinker and one of the greatest Jewish philosophers of our time. So I had many teachers and rabbis from different places. When I started studying to become rabbi, my only goal was to come back here to Denmark. Like I didn't want to be rabbi anywhere else. This was the place that I felt belonging to. My all 4 grandparents lived here. Actually, when at the end we moved, I still had 3 grandparents alive, and it was quite amazing for my children to have 3 great grandparents living in their city. But my grandfather, the last one, passed away now a year and a half ago. So I had the opportunity to be here with them these years. But I wanted to come only here, because of the historical family connection, but also because of the community here is very unique in its really way of being. You're a rabbi for everyone. It's not you're not a rabbi for the religious ones. You're really a rabbi for everyone, and connected to everyone. It's the most amazing job you can find in the world. I have the best position in the world, and so don't try to take it, please.
Okay, and I was going to, but since you said I won't, then I won't.
No, not you or the other listeners.
Okay. Well, I think that that's very beautiful, and something that I've been hearing from some of these rabbis throughout different sort of smaller diaspora communities is that beautiful sentiment of unity within the community, that it's not as divided by sect or religious practice. So I'm happy that you feel that way as well.
Judaism doesn't belong to only to the religious.
Right.
I can say it personally that it's part of my life. I said I have 4 Danish grandparents. One was a chief rabbi. One who grew up in the Bund family, very socialist, very atheist, married a non-Jew, but very connected to Jewishness. And then another grandmother from Eastern Europe who came to that. So all of these were very different models of Judaism that are part of my life, and I can't say that my Bundist grandfather or the chief rabbi who was more Jewish. That they were both 100% Jewish, and they are very different in their approaches, but they're both Jewish inspiration for me on how I see my life and my understanding of Jewishness. They became a great friend and were very close to each other. The differences were in praxis, but not in the way they saw Judaism and how it should inspire us.
That's very beautiful. I'd like to make the distinction with people between religious and observant, because I often think people describe people, oh, he's not so religious, but he's not practicing perhaps, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have that spirit and that spark. So I think that that's important.
Yeah, even though I would say in Scandinavia, it's not like the same as in the US, where people are more spiritual, and there's more place to God in general, both in the public sphere and the which in Denmark is like no. Religiousness, that's something private. We don't. It's very, very different, and so people here are more less spiritual regarding that. But the question of practice and traditional. Masorti will be the word that describes probably most of the Jews in the world. That they are traditional. How much do they practice? That's like you have different levels. Many people ask me how many people keep kosher in Denmark, or like how many observant do you have in the community, and say I can't say that. I can say like more or less how many try to keep Shabbat and kosher according to the law. Then you have strictly according to the law, flexible but according to the law. But then it starts also many other and I can't put the line in one specific place. And some will say, okay, so you have only 4 or 5% of the community who keep kosher, and that is right. Like kosher, halachically kosher, it's not more than that. But if you open to do they have some kosher in their life, suddenly you'll find out that until about 45-50% of the community, people observe something. Either don't mix meat or milk, either not eating some kind of fish, or don't eat ham, or but they are doing something that is connected to the world of kosher. Is it kosher? Can I eat at their house with no problem? No, of course that's a challenge. But do they have kosher in their life? They actually do have. That's why I really agree with that it's not yes or no. It's not the T and Chiloni, not at all. It's traditional, and we're all on some kind of a spectrum of how observant we are, like from a full and less, but less observant doesn't mean less Jewish.
Right.
Because you can be not observant at all and Jewish with all your heart. My non-Jewish grandfather, he ate everything. He didn't care about the things, but from the second the second he stood up in the morning, he was a Jew from in all his heart and all in the way he looked in the world. All his books were like the Yiddish books and all these tradition here, and that is in Israel and fighting for Jews around the world and the Jewish community here and all of that. That was who he was. So even if you're zero observant, you can still be very Jew.
Beautifully said. Wow. I really agree with that. Let's shift gears. Let's come back to Denmark, to Copenhagen. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Jews in Copenhagen? I know it goes back many centuries, but share a little bit with us what that looks like.
Yeah, we just celebrated 400 years for Jews in Denmark, starting in 1622. Wow. The king sent a letter to Jews and only to the Portuguese Jews. They were the richest, and like the Ashkenazi Jews were seen down upon, looked down upon. And so he invited the Portuguese Jews from Amsterdam and some other cities, wrote a letter to inviting them to the new city once. And it was in the part that is today in northern Germany, and was part of Denmark at the time and for many years. And this is the start of Jewish life in Denmark. And one of the amazing things that happened in Denmark, that this is one of the places that Jews weren't thrown out of, except one period, and of course the only one period that they left was the best time of Denmark, the rescuing of Danish Jews in the Holocaust. We'll probably talk about also, but that wasn't the Danes throwing the Jews out. That was the Nazis who came here. So in general, I would say that 400 years of Jews in Denmark with no pause, no one being thrown out. Very, very few anti-Semitic episodes. We didn't have any pogrom. The most violent part was the 1819. We had a small. There was an economical crisis in Denmark at the time. It was just after the Jews got the civil rights. So some said about the king loves the Jews too much, and these Jews who came and ruined the economy. But it stayed only as demonstrations and a few windows were broken. Not one casualty. So this is our worst, like historically, when we talk about pogroms of the majority going on. There are other attacks in the more modern time, but this is, I think, unheard of in terms of Jewish communities in the world. As I said, since then. So slowly they came into all the cities in Denmark, and the Jewish community in Copenhagen starts more than 300 years ago. And in the beginning, there were many small Jewish communities. So there were Jews in all of Denmark, in all these cities. Slowly, together with the urbanism that happened in the world too, people are leaving these the smaller cities and go more and more to the city. So Copenhagen becomes the center of Jewish life in Denmark, like the only center at some point. I think the last synagogue is closed just before the Second World War. So in quite an early stage, we do have cemeteries around. We have 10 cemeteries around around Denmark that are still part of we own the cemeteries, and we take care of them from Copenhagen. And that's why we don't speak about our Jewish community in Copenhagen, speak about the Jewish community in Denmark, because we have, I don't remember the exact number, but a bit less than 10% of our members live outside of Copenhagen, but also far outside of Copenhagen, in a different kind of Denmark. But this should be a geography lesson. But we even have had points with the Jews in Greenland that are part of our community. A very important part is when the Great Synagogue is built. And the first time we have a very clear chief rabbi, the chief rabbi of the Great Synagogue, that is the chief rabbi of Denmark. And at that point, when the Great Synagogue is built, our synagogue has place for 1,000 people. And they bring a young rabbi from Germany. He starts in 1829, and he's the chief rabbi of Denmark for 62 years. He passed away in 1891, and he's the first rabbi of the Great Synagogue. The Great Synagogue opens in 1833, and in many ways, he's the one to create the traditions around this synagogue. Now, at that time, as you and everyone knows, this is the main time where everyone splits. Everywhere in Europe, community splits because of Reformation, Orthodoxy, and different streams and views. And the same issue comes here too. There are many of the Danish Jewish community who want to assimilate in Danish society. The Jewish school opened also at the same time, the start of the 1800s, and the goal of the principal who opened the school, is a very prominent member of the community, is to make the Jews more Danes, like to make them now that we have same rights, civil rights, we need to become more and more Danes. There were even a situation where rabbis. Remember that 100 years ago, the rabbi who came from Germany, an Orthodox rabbi, he was the one to decide which names you're allowed to give, because it was like also officially from Denmark. The rabbi had this position, and someone came to him and said he wants to call his son Simon, and he said, no, it's too Jewish, you can't. Like, you have to give your son a Danish name. It was like, and he said no, and he had the power. He was able to say to the parent, no, you're not allowed to. So they called him Simon, but they gave him another Zygmunt, or called him something else. but and many at that time had these two names, right? That exist also in many other places. That my grandfather, everyone knew them as Bent, and his Jewish name was Binyamin. And you had that lots of people had the Danish name and a Jewish name that were very different from each other. So if I go back to the start, at that point, this question is essential regarding how do we, which kind of a synagogue should we have? Should we be more Reformed synagogue with prayers in Danish, or should we, or in German, or should we, or is it more Orthodox? And the rabbi who comes here, Avraham Alexander Wolf, he sees this situation, and there's a split. Like there's debates are huge, and he makes a gesture that changes, I think, the future of Danish Jewry until today. He writes, or together with the help of someone else, psalms in Danish about Shabbat, about high holidays, about like for every high holiday, a psalm. And every Shabbat and every high holiday, every Chag, before the sermon, they would sing a psalm in Danish. And that was enough. That was enough to not split the community to an Orthodox and Reformed communities, to be a real Einheitsgemeinde. And that shows how much, like, you could talk about principles and values and worldviews, but usually the community doesn't really care about the philosophy, because most of the Jews at the 1800s, most of them in Europe already are not observant, regardless if they're Reform or Orthodox. The synagogue. So the synagogue can be whatever it was. The community members did whatever they wanted. It can be more religious and less religious. But the question is what happened in the joint room. And the main question was the language of the prayer. The language of the prayer, this was much more crucial than the question, how do you find halacha? How do you understand God? And all of that is like, that's not very important. The important thing is, how does it look like? What do we do together? And this was the main split. And what he did, by this small gesture, he managed to let the community stay together and was one, with place to everyone. And that is something that I think is remarkable, and we should cherish and learn until today. Like, you really try to solve the big that becomes, like, you ask, you can go to the concrete example and start putting so much values into this decision. Why do you want this? Because of all the values. But sometimes you can make a small solution to the small one, and then stay with these differences together. And that's what part of the start of what kind of a Jewish community we had here. And these communities, we didn't necessarily needed to belong like Orthodox, Reform. We're Jews, observant Jews as a community. Like, the community is observant. Individuals, they are in the whole in the whole spectrum. And of course, we can't talk about the history without talking about the story of the Second World War. The rescue of Danish Jews is a history that was and still seen as like the light in the darkness. When Denmark was occupied, the Jews didn't have any different rules. Like, the Danes got an autonomy, and they continued with their government and the king, and everything continued. And then in 1943, the Danes decided to stop working with the Nazis, because the Nazis demanded them to execute prisoners, and they said, no, we are not going to execute Danes. And then the cooperation stopped, and almost immediately the Nazis decided on a plan to take the Jews. Long story short, the German leader who decided to do this deportation is also the one to leak the information to the Danish government. Why? We can leave it to history. Some wanted to say that he became when I grew up, it was because he became a bit Danish. So that's what they used to say when I was a child. Today, they lean more to say that that he had his maybe, again, it's all speculation. Maybe he had an interest of the Danish underground resistance instead of fighting Nazis, saving Jews. It's better for him as the government of the Nazi that he needs to take as much as he can from the area. Then let them save some Jews. It gives them more time to focus on something else. But that's speculation too. So we can't know. But the result of that was that the Danish government approached Sweden and got permission to send all the Jews to Sweden, which were neutral at the time. And the Danish Jews in an amazing, like 3 weeks in October, we just celebrated 80 years to that. The Jews are hidden in homes and smuggled to Swedish in boats, and out of about 7,500 Jews, 7,000 are rescued in that way. 500 are caught and sent to Theresienstadt. We have, of course, people who died, and some committed suicide and such, but the majority also stayed alive because Denmark demanded that. The Danish Red Cross visited them. They sent packages to the Danish Jews, and there was an agreement with for what used to be the foreign ministry with the Germans that they're not touching the Danish group, and at the end of the war they were even saved 2 weeks before the Nazis' final fall. They are sent by buses from Theresienstadt through Germany to freedom, while everywhere else you have death marches and wiping the left of the Danish Jews are rescued at that point. So it's an amazing story, very different than anywhere else in Europe. And it's just became a part of who we are as Danish Jews today, like the gratitude to Denmark to saving us. I wouldn't be here today. 3 of my grandparents were on those boats, and the last one was active in the resistance and followed my grandfather on the bicycle on his way to Sweden. So yeah, that's a very central story for us as Jews that we celebrate and remember all the time.
Quite remarkable. I didn't know all of that Holocaust history about Denmark, and it's quite a unique story. You are right. What does the community look like today? How large is the community, by the way?
When we talk about member of the community, we only count from 18, so we're about 1,600 members. With children, I would say something around 2,500 that are the members. But we have more Jews who are part of the community who are not members. Everywhere else, that they are also part of community life here. And people come to synagogue. Some of the members are very angry, like they're using us. We pay for everything, but they are part of the Jewish life here. So in that sense, they're part of our community, even though they're not members of the community. In that sense, I would say about 3,000, 3,500 that are part of the Jewish life here in the main synagogue. We have also a small Chabad Machzikei Adat synagogue that most of the people go there are also members of our community. And then there is a liberal synagogue that started about 25 years ago, I think. And also there, some of the people are a member of this community. Many are also converts who maybe couldn't convert according to Orthodox line. And I think some of those who went there are people who came from the States, from Reform synagogues, and just couldn't understand this very traditional. We have in our synagogue, women sit upstairs on the balcony. It's like so different than what they know from from the States. So some of them were part of creating this synagogue, and we have very, very good relations with them. So in that sense, they're also part of, we have joint things we do together, like Yom Ha'atzmaut and celebrations, and we are responsible of the security of the community. We are responsible of the security of everyone, also the other community. So in that sense, we are the main Jewish organizations for everyone. In the synagogue today, we have people from who came here from South Africa and Canada and the States and England and Spain and France and like really from all over the world. And it's been beautiful to see from Colombia. Like really, it's part of a community that doesn't have a very big Danish core, that it still have, but many of the Danish are in the periphery of the community, not necessarily the one who comes. I remember like a couple of years ago, someone came to visit from Israel who grew up in the community, and he came to me shocked after the service and says, "It's the first time in my life," he's 70 years old, he said, "It was the first time in my life that I didn't recognize one face in the synagogue." And it's not because there was no one in the synagogue, like all of his generation, some of them were older, so didn't come, but these people who were the main group of the community just are not the main group anymore. And it's a very interesting change that happened here, and very international change. Yeah.
So you have a pretty sizable community. What sort of Jewish things other than the synagogue do you have in terms of, do you have the schools? Do you have kosher restaurants? What does the community have to offer?
We have a school. We have one butcher shop. No restaurants. Chabad has some kind of restaurant they have. We have a catering in the community, but we have a culture festival and many events. It's crazy busy here all the time. We have when I came here, I recreated the summer camps. I think one of the things that we really lacked here was the ownership of youngsters, that they own their Jewish identity and what they do. That it's not only school and all the teachers or all the rabbis. Even though I came at 30 years old, I was still much older for them. And that is, it's so critical. I know for myself and probably for most of the people who are active, usually they see role models who are a few years older than them, not much older than them. And I really believe that youth movements and these things are the most crucial. So this is what the work we did, and it's amazing. We recreated these summer camps, and today we have I started the first summer camp. We had managed to gather 16 teens to come. It was amazing. People were wow. And together we do it as a cooperation with Scandinavia. So we do summer camps together with people from Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And last year we had 3 summer camps for different ages with more than 100 participants. So it grew up in 8 years since the first one. It grew up tremendously. And even more important is in the first years it was so hard to find leaders, because being a leader in a summer camp usually comes from someone who participated in summer camps, and it's much harder if you don't have if you didn't grow up in that being a leader. It's much harder. And the last year we had a very good headache of having too many candidates to be leaders in summer camp, and that is an amazing change, because that's a change of these people are leaders in summer camp. These are those who take responsibility, both ownership and also responsibility among themselves, to give something to the next group, and creating something that is more a natural growth, that you have. As a youngster, you want to participate. Then you participate for the first time, and then what the older one does is then you want to do that, and then you want to become a leader, and then you're already part of this path of owning, your Jewish identity, and not only grown-ups who tells you how to be Jew. You'll do Jew.
Yeah, that is very true. It's it's important to engage teens and kids because they are the future of the nation. I want to get to strengths, but first tell me about struggles the community faces that maybe are unique to Jewish life in Copenhagen and Denmark, and also maybe if you could talk about anti-Semitism.
I would say that the main struggle that the community has from the outside, the regular struggles are the same with every Jewish community of engagement and coming and all of that. This is the main thing. The main struggle from the outside is that, which is very unique to Denmark, is the debates about circumcision. The reason I say it's unique, you also hear about it in other places, but it's small. In Denmark, we have this problem that one of the leading, a very honorable doctor, he decided at some point he decided that circumcision is the worst thing we can, worst human right problem we have in the world today, and he's the only doctor who made research to find problems with circumcision, and now all his research is very problematic, like really from methodically. I can show you a few examples, but the problem is that he's prominent and he burned for it. So we have a group in Denmark who are like making a ban on circumcision. This is their goal in their life, and that's why we experienced all the time we have articles about it, and there was actually a suggestion in the parliament to ban circumcision, and the majority in Denmark supports a ban. Now the majority doesn't know what it means, but there is but it's very hard for when a politician knows that there's a majority for something. It's very hard to be against it, especially if you also think it's weird and probably bad in some way. So we are fighting. We have been here 400 years, and now for the first time we need a political advisor into the community. Like we need to do lobbying to the right to be Jews in Denmark, and that is something that is very, very hard. We got the support of the government, and we got the support. So we managed to come through the last time, but it's an ongoing fight, and this is it's a problem everywhere else, but we experience more than other places because of this very strong lobby, and because we have the only the only researcher in the world who work actively against circumcision. He's Danish. I apologize on behalf of the Danes. I say that I'm a Dane too. I'm Danish Israeli, so I'm really sad that this is something that can be. So this is one challenge that we have.
Now, on the flip side, the strengths of the community. What makes the community in Copenhagen strong? What are the unique qualities that you think make it beautiful?
I would go back to things that I already said, but this is the uniqueness I think we have is part of it. It's the continuity that is a challenge and a possibility, because the continuity and traditions can be a limit. Say, oh, any change is bad because we have to keep our local traditions. That local traditions and having a special place, I think it's a huge strength. And we have something unique that many other communities don't have. We have some unique melodies. Many of the synagogues, for example, you go today, everyone has exactly the same prayer, because Karlibach took over Kabbalat Shabbat, and we also do Karlibach. But we have some unique thing what we do only in Copenhagen. I think, and I love it. So we have like a continuity of special local traditions, which I think is a great strength. We are today in a place that we are also much more open to people from the outside and to changes within this. I think one of the strengths we are today, that we are aware of the challenges. Yeah. We're aware of the challenges and are open to do something to change. To change. And another something that is very unique is the way we our Orthodox approach to mixed marriages. that we managed to also include families of mixed marriages in the community, and where the children are part, they convert as children when they grow up as part of community Jewish life, and go to summer camps and studying and learning these things. This is something a very unique model in the Orthodox world. It happened in very few countries. I think this is something remarkable. So and we have some great people, but that's not unique to us. So Denmark is an amazing place. So anyone who looks for a good place to raise their children as Jews, and in a society that is open and social democrat economically, and also a beautiful place to live in. So Copenhagen is a place.
People should definitely come visit and see what the community has to offer for themselves. But thank
Everyone
you so
are
much,
welcome.
Rabbi Melchior, for being here with us today and teaching us about Jewish life in Denmark. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. All the best.